I've carried this secret for 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of pretending to be someone I'm not. And now, standing here in my tailored suit with 300 guests, waiting in the chapel behind me, the weight of what I did is crushing the air from my lungs. My fiancée is about to walk down the aisle. The woman I love. The woman who trusts me with her whole heart, who believes she's marrying an honest man. And somewhere in this building, sitting among the guests, is the only other person who knows the truth about what I did right before Rachel left. The truth I swore I'd take to my grave. I never thought I'd be standing here, suffocating beneath a secret that should have died years ago. But that's the thing about secrets, isn't it? They don't die. They wait. They fester. They grow stronger in the darkness until the moment they decide to tear your entire world apart. This is my confession, not just about one night of weakness, but about who I really am, what I'm capable of, and the price I'm about to pay for believing I could outrun the past. To understand how I got here, you need to understand Rachel. We met when I was 24, fresh out of law school, convinced I was going to change the world. She was 23, a junior architect at a small firm downtown, sketching buildings she swore would define skylines one day. We met at a coffee shop near the courthouse, both reaching for the same abandoned newspaper. Her laugh when our hands touched, this surprised musical sound, is still one of the clearest memories I have. 3 dates in, I knew she was different. Not different in the way people say that word when they're infatuated, but genuinely different. Rachel didn't play games. She didn't hide behind walls or test me with silences. She was direct, honest, terrifyingly authentic in a way that made me want to be better, just to keep up with her. By 6 months, we'd moved in together. A cramped one-bedroom apartment with a radiator that clanked all night and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. We called it our castle. We talked about the future constantly, the house we'd buy, the careers we'd build, the life we'd create together. I believed every word. I meant every promise. For 4 years, we grew up together. My career at the firm took off. I made junior partner faster than anyone in my cohort, working 80-hour weeks, bringing home victories like trophies I wanted her to be proud of. Rachel's designs started getting noticed. She won a regional award, then another. We moved to a nicer apartment, then a small townhouse. We talked about marriage, about kids. The future seemed inevitable, beautiful, assured. But somewhere along the way, the cracks started forming. Hairline fractures I didn't notice until they'd spread across everything. The 80-hour weeks became 90. The victories I brought home stopped feeling like gifts and started feeling like apologies. Rachel's career was exploding in its own direction, and suddenly we were two people sprinting toward separate horizons, waving at each other across a widening distance. We stopped having dinner together. We stopped having conversations that weren't logistical. Intimacy became something scheduled, mechanical, another item on an endless list. I told myself it was temporary, that we were just busy, that this is what successful couples looked like in their late 20s. Building empires required sacrifice. Once we made it to the other side, everything would be perfect again. I was lying to myself, of course. I was already lonely in that relationship, and I suspect she was too. But neither of us knew how to say it. Neither of us wanted to admit that the castle we'd built was crumbling from the inside. Then came the offer. It arrived on a Tuesday evening, 6 months before everything ended. Rachel came home with a look on her face I'd never seen before, somewhere between terror and exhilaration. "I got the position," she said, barely through the door. I looked up from my laptop. "What position?" "London, the fellowship. They want me." My stomach dropped before my brain fully processed the words. Rachel had applied to this international architecture fellowship months ago, back when it seemed like a distant fantasy. A 2-year placement in London, working on heritage restoration projects, fully funded. She'd mentioned it once, maybe twice, but always as a dream, something abstract and far away. Now it was concrete. Now it was real. That's incredible, I said, standing up, moving toward her. Rachel, that's amazing. Congratulations. But even as I hugged her, I felt the ground shifting beneath us. 2 years in London, a different continent, a different time zone. What did that mean for us? We talked about it for weeks. Could I go with her? Could I take a leave of absence? Work remotely? Find a position at a London firm? We ran the numbers, made calls, explored every possibility. But the truth was impossible to avoid. My career was in a critical phase. I was 18 months away from senior partner. Leaving now would mean giving up everything I'd worked toward for a decade. And Rachel's fellowship wasn't flexible. She couldn't defer, couldn't negotiate the timeline. It was now or never. We had to choose, her dream or mine. Looking back, I know what we should have done. We should have sat down, really talked, really listened to each other. We should have made the hard decision together. Either I sacrifice my career for us, or she declines the fellowship for us, or we accept that we've reached the end of the road. Any of those choices would have been honest. Instead, we did what broken couples do. We avoided the conversation. We pretended the decision didn't need to be made. We told ourselves we'd figure it out, that long distance would work, that 2 years wasn't that long, that if we really loved each other, we could survive anything. But underneath all those reassurances, we both knew we were already letting go. The final months were brutal, not in an explosive way. There were no screaming matches, no thrown dishes, no dramatic confrontations. It was worse than that. It was the quiet violence of two people slowly becoming strangers while still sharing a bed. Rachel was consumed by preparation for London, visa paperwork, housing arrangements, project briefings, farewell events with colleagues. I was consumed by a massive case at the firm, a corporate litigation that demanded every waking hour. We became roommates, then ghosts, drifting past each other in hallways, leaving notes on the kitchen counter instead of having conversations. I can't pinpoint when I stopped fighting for us. Maybe it was when she started talking about London like I wasn't part of the future. Maybe it was when I caught myself imagining what life would look like after she left and feeling relief instead of grief. That's the shameful truth. Part of me wanted her to go. Part of me wanted out, and I was too cowardly to end it myself. So I let the circumstances do it for me. Let her fellowship become the excuse I needed, the clean exit I could tell myself wasn't my fault. That was my first betrayal, the silent one. The slow surrender of a relationship I'd promised to protect, but it wasn't my last. Her name was Natalie. She started at the firm about 3 months before Rachel left. Associate attorney, transferred from the Chicago office, sharp as a scalpel and twice as precise. We were assigned to the same case, the corporate litigation that was consuming my life. Late nights became later. Working dinners became routine. The kind of intense, pressurized collaboration that blurs boundaries without you realizing they're moving. I won't pretend I didn't notice her. Natalie was beautiful in an unconventional way. All angles and intensity, dark hair always slightly disheveled, a smile that felt like a secret shared just with you. She had this way of looking at me when I spoke, like everything I said mattered, like I was the most interesting person she'd ever met. After months of feeling invisible at home, that attention was intoxicating. Nothing happened for weeks. We were professionals. I was in a relationship, however deteriorated. The flirtation, if that's even what it was, stayed safely in the realm of plausible deniability. Extended eye contact, casual touches on the arm, conversations that drifted past work into personal territory, sharing frustrations and ambitions and fears. I told myself it was harmless. Everyone has work friends. Everyone has connections with colleagues. I wasn't doing anything wrong. But I was. I was building something, even if I didn't admit it. I was creating a space where something could happen. And when the moment came, I stepped into it with eyes wide open. It was 2 weeks before Rachel left. We just won a crucial motion in the case. a victory that meant the trial would likely settle in our favor. The team went out to celebrate. Dinner, drinks, the triumphant camaraderie of people who'd survived a battle together. I should have gone home after dinner. Rachel and I had plans the next morning, one of our rare scheduled attempts to spend quality time before her departure. But I didn't go home. The group dwindled as the night went on. People peeled off to catch trains, relieve babysitters, face the obligations that pulled them back to their real lives. Eventually, it was just Natalie and me, sitting in a corner booth at a bar I'd never been to before, finishing drinks we didn't need. We were talking about nothing important, the case, the partners, office politics. But beneath the surface conversation, something else was happening. A tension that had been building for months was finally becoming undeniable. "I should go," I said, not moving. "Probably," she agreed, not moving either. We looked at each other. The moment stretched, elastic and dangerous. "Marcus," she said quietly, and the way she said my name made everything else disappear. I had a choice. I always had a choice. That's what I've had to face in the years since. The knowledge that I wasn't swept away by some force beyond my control. I chose. I made a decision in that bar, looking at a woman who wasn't Rachel, and I chose to stay. I chose to lean in. I chose to kiss her, and I chose to follow her back to her apartment and do something I can never undo. I woke up at 4 in the morning in an unfamiliar bed. Natalie asleep beside me, and the full weight of what I'd done crashed over me like a wave of ice water. Rachel was at home. Rachel, who trusted me. Rachel, who was leaving in 2 weeks, who was scared and excited and trying to hold on to us even as we fell apart. Rachel, who deserved better than this. I got dressed in the dark, moving as quietly as possible, desperate to escape before the morning made everything more real. Natalie stirred as I reached the door. "Marcus?" I turned back. She was propped up on one elbow, hair tangled, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I have to go," I said. I can't." "I know." Her voice was soft, understanding. "Go." I left. I walked through the empty streets as dawn broke, constructing the lie I would tell Rachel about staying late at the office, about crashing on a colleague's couch, about the celebration running too long. By the time I got home, the story was polished, seamless, bulletproof. Rachel barely questioned it. She was too distracted with packing, too consumed by the transition ahead. She kissed me goodbye that morning before heading to work, and I watched her leave, thinking about how easy lying was when the person you were lying to trusted you completely. I told myself it would never happen again. I told myself it was a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness that didn't reflect who I really was. I would bury it, forget it, move forward as if it never happened. Rachel would go to London, we would try long distance for a while, it would fade, we would part as friends. She would never know. No one would ever know. The secret would die with me. That's what I believed. That's how naive I was. The 2 weeks before Rachel left were torture. Not because she suspected anything she didn't, but because of how normal everything felt. How easily I slipped back into our routine, as if I hadn't shattered something sacred just days before. We had farewell dinners with friends. We finished packing her boxes for storage. We talked about video call schedules and flight plans and how we would handle the holidays. She cried the night before her flight, holding on to me in bed, telling me how scared she was to leave, how much she loved me, how we would make this work. I held her and said all the right things. And the whole time, a voice in my head was screaming that I didn't deserve her trust, that I was a fraud, that I should confess before she got on that plane. But I didn't. I couldn't find the words. I couldn't face the conversation. I couldn't watch her walk away knowing the truth, carrying that betrayal into her new life. So I convinced myself that silence was a kindness, that protecting her from the truth was somehow noble. It was cowardice, pure and simple. The airport goodbye was worse than I'd imagined. We stood at the security checkpoint, surrounded by travelers rushing to their gates, and said things that felt too small for the moment. Be safe. Call me when you land. This isn't goodbye forever. She kissed me, held my face in her hands, and looked at me with those clear, trusting eyes. I love you, she said. We'll figure this out. I love you too, I said, and I did. Despite everything, I did. That's the part that haunts me most, that love and betrayal can coexist, that you can hurt someone deeply while still caring about them, that the heart is capable of holding contradictions that should destroy it. She walked through security, turned back once to wave, and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there for a long time, watching the space where she'd been, and I made myself a promise. Whatever happened next, I would never tell her what I'd done. I would protect her from that pain forever. It was the first of many promises I would break. Long distance lasted 4 months. It died the way most long-distance relationships die, not with a dramatic ending, but with a slow erosion of connection. The time difference made calls difficult. My work schedule made visits impossible. Her new life in London was consuming and exciting, filled with colleagues and projects and experiences I wasn't part of. My life in the States continued unchanged, the same routines and pressures and emptiness. We really tried, scheduled video calls, handwritten letters, plans for a Christmas reunion, but the gaps between conversations grew longer, the topics grew thinner, the silences grew heavier. By month 4, we both knew. The breakup call was almost a relief. Rachel cried, but there was a resignation in her voice that told me she'd been expecting this. We said we would stay friends. We said we were making the mature decision. We said we would always care about each other. All of it was true. And none of it mentioned the real reason I was letting her go. The knowledge that I had already betrayed her. That I had no right to hold on to someone I'd hurt without her even knowing. We hung up, and I sat in my empty apartment, and I told myself this was for the best. She would move on. She would find someone in London, someone who deserved her, someone who would never do what I did. And I would carry my secret quietly, alone, letting it fade into the background noise of my life. That's how I thought it would end. I had no idea it was just beginning. In the years after Rachel, I threw myself into work with a desperation that bordered on self-destruction. Senior partner, major clients, landmark cases. I built a reputation as one of the top corporate litigators in the city, and I told myself the achievements meant something, that success could fill the hollow space the secret had carved inside me. Natalie transferred back to Chicago about 8 months after that night. We never spoke about what happened. Occasionally, I'd see her name on firm-wide emails, and a cold sensation would ripple through my chest. But she was half a country away. She was someone else's problem, someone else's memory. I dated sparingly, a few months here, a few months there. Nothing stuck. I couldn't commit, couldn't let anyone close enough to see the cracks. The guilt I carried wasn't something I could articulate, but it was always there, this low-frequency hum beneath every interaction, reminding me that I was capable of terrible things. Then I met Hannah. It was 3 years after Rachel left, a legal conference in Miami, one of those networking events where you drink too much wine and exchange too many business cards and forget everyone by the following week. But I didn't forget Hannah. She was a corporate strategist for a consulting firm, smart and funny, and completely unimpressed by the posturing lawyers around her. She called out my elevator pitch as impressively hollow within 5 minutes of meeting me. And instead of being offended, I laughed. A real laugh. The first one I could remember in months. We spent the rest of the conference together. Not romantically, just connected. She saw through the performance I'd perfected, the confident attorney facade, and somehow that felt like relief instead of exposure. When the conference ended, we exchanged numbers with the mutual understanding that this wasn't over. 6 months later, we were dating. A year after that, she moved to my city for a better position, a decision she'd been considering anyway, she insisted, though I knew I was part of the calculation. 2 years in, I asked her to marry me. The night I proposed, kneeling on the beach at sunset like some romantic comedy cliche, I thought I'd finally escaped my past. I thought I'd become someone new, someone worthy of this incredible woman who had chosen me. The secret about Rachel still existed, buried deep, but it felt manageable now. Ancient history. A mistake from another lifetime, committed by a version of me that no longer existed. Hannah said yes. We set a date. We planned a wedding. I was going to get my fresh start. And then, 4 weeks before the ceremony, everything began to unravel. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning. I was at my desk, reviewing contracts, thinking about final guest list approvals and seating arrangements and all the mundane logistics that consume you before a wedding. My inbox refreshed, and there it was, a name I hadn't seen in years. Natalie Webb. My heart stopped. I stared at the subject line for a full minute before opening it. The message was short. Marcus, I'll be in town next week, transferred to the New York office permanently. We should talk. It's important. Natalie, I read it 3 times, my mind racing through possible explanations. Was she just being professional? Reconnecting with former colleagues? Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was projecting significance onto an innocent message. But that last line, it's important, sat in my chest like a stone. I didn't respond. I closed the email, archived it, and told myself to focus on work. I had too much going on to spiral over a cryptic message from someone I'd barely spoken to in 7 years, but the peace I'd constructed was already cracking, and the cracks only grew wider. She appeared at the office 4 days later. I was coming out of a meeting, joking with a junior associate about weekend plans, when I saw her standing by the reception desk. 7 years had changed her. She looked more polished, more confident, the ambitious associate replaced by a seasoned professional, but the recognition was instant and visceral. Our eyes met across the lobby. She smiled, a controlled expression that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, it's been a long time. Natalie. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I got your email. And didn't respond. She tilted her head slightly. I figured I'd take the initiative. The associate beside me was looking between us, sensing the tension. I made quick introductions, made excuses, and guided Natalie toward a conference room, my pulse thudding in my ears. As soon as the door closed, her demeanor shifted. I'm not here to cause problems, she said before I could speak. But there's something you need to know. What is this about? She sat down, crossed her legs, and met my gaze with an unsettling calm. Rachel is back. The words didn't immediately compute. Rachel. Back. Here. Back from London? I managed. She moved back to the States 8 months ago. She's been working at an architecture firm downtown. Actually, Natalie paused, something calculating in her expression. She's engaged now, getting married this summer, to a colleague of mine from the Chicago office. I felt the room tilt slightly. Rachel was back. Rachel was engaged. Rachel was marrying someone connected to Natalie. Why are you telling me this? Because, Natalie said slowly, her fiancé is my friend, a close friend. And last week at a dinner party, Rachel and I ended up talking. She mentioned you, asked how you were doing, said she'd heard you were getting married. My mouth went dry. And I realized something, Marcus. The 2 of you ended things without her ever knowing what happened between us. She doesn't know. She spent years thinking the relationship just faded naturally, that nobody was at fault. Natalie's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. I've been carrying that too, and I'm tired of it. What exactly are you saying? She leaned forward. I'm saying I can't be friends with her fiancé. Can't sit at their wedding, can't pretend nothing happened while this secret exists. So either you tell her what happened 7 years ago, or I will. The next few days were a waking nightmare. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything beyond the bomb Natalie had placed in the center of my carefully constructed life. The wedding was 3 weeks away. Hannah was buried in final preparations, radiantly happy, completely unaware that her fiancé was coming apart at the seams. I considered every option. Deny everything. Natalie had no proof, no witnesses, nothing concrete, but that felt desperate, fragile, a house of cards that could collapse under the slightest pressure. Confront Natalie, convince her to stay silent, but she'd made her position clear and I could see she meant it. Confess to Hannah first, control the narrative. But how do you tell the woman you love that you once betrayed someone else, that you're capable of that kind of cruelty? And beneath all the strategic calculations, there was a deeper current pulling at me. Rachel. She was here, she was close. She had spent 7 years believing our relationship ended for innocent reasons, that I was a decent person who just wasn't right for her. She'd built an image of me as her friendly ex, someone she could mention casually at dinner parties without flinching. And I had let her believe that lie. I had let her walk through the world with a version of our history that was fiction. Didn't she deserve to know the truth? The question haunted me through sleepless nights. I would lie beside Hannah, listening to her breathe, and wonder what kind of man I really was. The guilt I'd buried for years had resurfaced with a vengeance, clawing at my conscience, demanding an accounting. And the more I thought about it, the clearer the answer became. I couldn't build a marriage on the same foundation of silence that had poisoned everything with Rachel. I couldn't stand at an altar and promise Hannah a lifetime of honesty while a confession rotted in my chest. If I wanted to become someone better, if I wanted to actually deserve the future I was claiming, I had to face the past. I had to tell Rachel. Not because Natalie was forcing my hand, but because it was right. And then I had to tell Hannah everything. I reached out to Rachel through a mutual friend, asking if we could meet for coffee. She agreed, sounding genuinely pleased, suggesting a cafe near her office on a Thursday afternoon. Walking there, I rehearsed my confession 100 times. Every version sounded inadequate, pathetic, insufficient. How do you explain something like this? How do you look someone in the eye and admit you betrayed them when they were already hurting, already leaving, already vulnerable? She was already seated when I arrived, and the sight of her after 7 years stole my breath. She looked good, older, more settled, with a calm confidence she hadn't had in her 20s. Her ring caught the light as she waved me over. Marcus. She stood to hug me, warm and uncomplicated. It's so good to see you. You too, Rachel. You look amazing. We sat. We ordered coffee. We did the dance of catching up, careers, families, the surface details that reconnect old acquaintances. She showed me photos of her fiancé, a pleasant-looking man named Tom who worked in commercial real estate. I showed her a photo of Hannah, received the appropriate compliments, and the whole time my confession sat in my throat like broken glass. I'm glad we're both in good places, Rachel said, stirring her latte. I used to wonder, whether we'd made a mistake ending things. But looking at us now, I think it was right. We helped each other grow, and then we grew in different directions. No villains, no drama, just life. The words hit me like a physical blow. No villains. Rachel, I said, my voice cracking slightly. She looked at me, curiosity flickering across her face. What is it? I set down my cup. My hands were trembling, and I pressed them flat on the table to steady them. I need to tell you something I should have told you 7 years ago. Her expression shifted, concern replacing the lightness. Marcus, you're scaring me. What's wrong? 2 weeks before you left for London, I did something terrible. I forced myself to meet her eyes. I slept with someone else, a colleague. It was one night, and I've regretted it every day since, but I never told you. I let you leave believing our relationship ended cleanly, and it didn't. I betrayed you. Silence. Rachel's face went through a series of transformations, confusion, disbelief, pain, anger, before settling into something harder. something I'd never seen in her before. 2 weeks before I left. Yes. When I was crying in your arms about how scared I was, when I was trusting you to hold on to us while I chased my dream. Yes. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the cafe's ambient noise. Wow. Okay. Wow. Rachel, I'm so sorry. Don't. She held up her hand, silencing me. Just don't. You don't get to apologize right now. You don't get to package this up neatly with a sorry and move on. I know. Do you? Because you had 7 years to tell me, and you chose to do it now, 2 weeks before you marry someone else, 2 weeks before I marry someone else. Why now, Marcus? Guilty conscience finally too heavy? I wanted to explain about Natalie, about the pressure, about how the truth had been forced into the light, but that felt like deflection, like shifting blame. So I just said, yes, something like that. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled but cold. Who was it? What? The woman. Who was she? I hesitated. But I'd come this far. Natalie Webb. She was an associate at my firm. I watched Rachel process the name. Recognition flickered. Tom's Natalie? The one transferring to New York? The connection landed like a punch. I didn't know they were connected, not until recently. So she knows. She's known this whole time, and she's been… Rachel pressed a hand to her forehead. God, she's been over for dinner. She's coming to my wedding. She sat across from me and Tom and never said a word. She's the one who told me I had to come clean. She couldn't carry it anymore. How noble of her. The sarcasm was acid. And you just went along with your life, made partner, got engaged, built this whole existence on top of a lie, and never once thought I deserved to know. I thought about it constantly. I convinced myself that telling you would only cause pain, that you'd moved on, that it was better. Better for who, Marcus? Her eyes were blazing now. Better for you. It was always about protecting yourself. The clean exit, the friendly ex-narrative, the nice little memory you got to keep while I walked around like an idiot, wondering sometimes why I felt like something had been off but never able to name it. I had no defense. Everything she said was true. You're right, I said quietly. It was selfish. It was cowardly. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was really just afraid. Afraid of seeing you hurt. Afraid of losing the version of myself that was a good person. You're not a good person, Marcus. Good people don't do what you did. The words landed exactly where they should have. I absorbed them, accepted them. I know. Rachel gathered her purse, her movements sharp and controlled. I need to go. I need to think. I need to decide whether to tell Tom about this, whether his friend has been carrying a secret about his fiance's ex for 7 years, whatever you need to do. She stood, then paused, looking down at me with an expression that held grief beneath the anger. I spent years thinking well of you, Marcus. I told people we ended things maturely, that you were one of the good ones. I defended you when my friends said all men were terrible. Her voice cracked slightly. You let me do that. You let me walk around advocating for your character while you knew the truth. I did. She nodded slowly, absorbing my acknowledgement. I can't forgive you. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But for what it's worth, I appreciate that you finally found the courage to tell me the truth. It took you 7 years too long, but at least you told me. She walked out. I sat at the table for another hour, watching my coffee go cold, feeling something like relief mixed with devastation. The truth was out. Rachel knew. Now came the harder part. I told Hannah that night. She'd noticed something was wrong the moment I came through the door. I'm not a good liar, at least not with her, and the weight I was carrying must have been visible in my posture, my silence, my inability to meet her eyes. We sat on the couch in our living room, the apartment decorated with wedding gifts and RSVP cards, surrounded by the evidence of the future we were supposed to share. And I told her everything. The affair with Natalie, the silence for 7 years, Rachel's departure without knowing, my cowardice, my shame, my reasons for finally confessing. Hannah listened without interrupting. Her face went through stages: shock, hurt, confusion, before settling into something I couldn't read. When I finished, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. "So let me understand this," she said finally. "You cheated on your ex-girlfriend right before she left the country. You never told her. You buried it for 7 years, and now, 2 weeks before our wedding, you're confessing because someone else was going to expose you. That's part of it. But also because I realized I can't marry you with this secret. I can't build our life on the same foundation of lies that destroyed things with Rachel. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, nothing I say is supposed to make you feel better. I just needed you to know who you're marrying, what I'm capable of." Hannah stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the city lights. Her silence was torture. "I'm not Rachel," she said eventually. "What you did to her, that was awful, truly awful. But you didn't do it to me. You didn't cheat on me. I know, but I lied to you, by omission. I let you believe you were marrying someone who had never done something like this." She turned to face me. "Have you ever been unfaithful to me? Even close to it?" "Never. Hannah, I swear to you, not once." "Why should I believe that? You kept this secret for 7 years. How do I know you're not keeping others?" The question was fair, and it had no satisfying answer. "You don't know. I can only tell you what's true and hope that means something." She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, there were tears in her eyes. "I don't know if I can marry you, Marcus. Not because of what you did to Rachel. That's between you and her. But because you could hide something that big for that long. It makes me wonder what else is hiding beneath the surface. Who you really are when no one's looking." "I understand. I need time. I need to think. I need to decide if I can trust you." She didn't come to bed that night. She stayed in the guest room, and I lay alone in the dark, listening to the silence, wondering if I'd just destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to me. The next 2 weeks were a kind of suspended purgatory. Hannah didn't call off the wedding, but she didn't confirm it either. She took space. She processed. She talked to her sister, her therapist, her friends. I gave her room, didn't pressure her, tried to be present without being overwhelming. Meanwhile, the fallout continued to spread. Rachel told Tom about Natalie. The friendship imploded. Natalie was disinvited from their wedding. There were angry phone calls, accusations, people forced to choose sides in a drama that had been dormant for years. And through it all, I felt the strange liberation of exposure. The secret that had weighed on me for so long was finally in the light. It was causing damage, real, painful damage, but there was also a kind of relief in no longer carrying it alone. I understood finally why people confess. Not because it makes things better, it often makes things worse, but because the burden of silence is its own kind of death. Secrets don't just hurt the people who don't know them, they consume the people who carry them, eroding integrity from the inside out. 4 days before the wedding, Hannah came to me with her decision. We sat in the same spot where I'd confessed, and she looked at me with an expression that held complexity I couldn't fully parse. "I've thought about this a lot," she said, "about who you were then, who you are now, whether people can really change. And I think you made a terrible mistake 7 years ago. I think you handled it in the worst possible way. I think there's a part of you that's capable of selfishness and cowardice that I didn't know existed." I nodded, accepting it. "But I also think," she continued slowly, "that you've carried that mistake with you every day since. That it's changed you. That the man sitting in front of me now is genuinely horrified by what he did and wouldn't do it again." "I wouldn't. I swear to you." "Let me finish." She held up her hand. "I believe you. I do. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I'm too in love to see clearly, but I believe you've become someone different. Someone who couldn't live with that secret anymore, even when keeping it was the easier path. I waited, barely breathing. I'm going to marry you, Marcus. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. But I need you to understand, this is your one pass. If there's ever anything else, anything you're hiding, or anything you do in the future that betrays my trust, we're done. No second chances. There won't be, I promise you. Prove it. Every day for the rest of our lives. Prove it. I pulled her into my arms, and for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not from relief, though there was that too. From gratitude for a grace I didn't deserve, and from the weight of the promise I'd made. The wedding happened. Not with 300 guests. We'd scaled back, canceled the elaborate venue, married in a small ceremony with immediate family and close friends. The spectacle didn't feel right anymore. What mattered was the commitment, stripped of pretense. Standing at that altar, looking at Hannah, I understood something I hadn't before. Love isn't about perfection. It's not about being the person who never makes mistakes. It's about having the courage to be honest about your failures, to let yourself be truly seen, and to do the hard work of earning trust after you've broken it. I'd spent 7 years performing the role of a good man while knowing I wasn't. Now finally, I had the chance to actually become one. But this story doesn't end with the wedding. 6 months later, I reached out to Rachel, not to ask for forgiveness. I had no right to that. Just to offer a more complete reckoning. A letter, handwritten, explaining everything I hadn't been able to articulate in that coffee shop. The loneliness I'd felt in our relationship. The cowardice that let me betray her rather than confront my own unhappiness. The years of guilt. The ways I'd worked to become someone different. I didn't expect a response. I wasn't looking for absolution. I just needed her to have the full truth, even if she threw the letter away unread. A month later, she wrote back. Her letter was measured and honest. She told me the confession had devastated her, forced her to re-examine our entire relationship through a different lens. She'd questioned her own judgment, wondered what signs she'd missed, felt the anger and grief that comes from realizing you were deceived by someone you trusted. But she'd also done work, therapy, reflection, difficult conversations with Tom about what she'd learned, and in that work, she'd found a kind of clarity. I don't forgive you, she wrote. That word feels too complete for what I actually feel, but I'm releasing you. I'm choosing not to carry the weight of what you did anymore. Not for your sake, for mine. You don't get to occupy space in my life as the villain I couldn't escape. I'm moving forward, and you're staying in the past where you belong. It was, I understood, more than I deserved, and it was exactly right. Standing here now, a year after that exchange, I can finally see my story clearly. I'm not a hero. I'm not even sure I'm a good person. What I did to Rachel was real harm, and no amount of confession or growth can undo it. She will always carry the scar of my betrayal, and I will always carry the shame of having caused it. But I'm also not the same man who walked out of Natalie's apartment at 4 a.m, convinced he could bury his sin forever. I've learned something about honesty, about the corrosive nature of secrets, about the difference between pretending to be good and actually doing the hard work of integrity. Hannah and I are building a life together, a real one, grounded in transparency rather than performance. When things are hard, we talk about them. When I feel tempted to hide something, even something small, I remember the weight I carried for 7 years and I choose openness instead. That's the lesson I've earned, carved into me by consequence. The truth will always demand its reckoning. You can choose to pay it early with honesty and humility, or you can let it compound interest in the darkness until it destroys everything you've built. I chose the harder path, eventually. Too late to avoid all the damage, but early enough to save what mattered most. If you're listening to this and carrying your own secret, something you did that you've never admitted, something that lives in the basement of your conscience like a creature waiting to escape, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Every situation is different. Every secret has its own weight, its own cost, its own calculation. But I will tell you this: the freedom on the other side of confession is real. It's painful, expensive, potentially devastating, but it's also liberating in a way that nothing else can be. You stop performing the role of the person who never made that mistake. You stop expending energy on maintaining a fiction. You become, for the first time, fully and honestly yourself. That honesty might cost you everything. It nearly cost me my future with Hannah. It definitely cost me Rachel's respect. But I would make the same choice again. Because the alternative, spending your whole life wearing a mask, knowing that the face underneath is something you're ashamed to show, is its own kind of prison. A sentence with no release date. A secret that eats you from the inside while everyone around you believes you're whole. I cheated on my ex right before she left, and I never told her, until I did. And that choice, not the cheating, not the silence, but the eventual truth, is the one that defined who I became.